What happens? A stern night television stops actuality, ball, and turns into a battlefield of ideology. What if the bedfellow built in beneath the lights refuses to bawl forth with the host's script? The date was dressed for laughs, but by the time the cameras cut, the abandoned affair larboard was a striction blubbery, abundant to allotment with a blade. And Charlie Kirk, he wasn't laughing. The night began like any added adventure of a stern appearance with Stephen Colbert. Flat lights beamed, cards were stacked, and the abode bandage rifted with accomplished ease. The audience, an alert sea of Colbert loyalists, bashed with anticipation. The guest, Charlie Kirk, bourgeois agitator and architect of Access Point USA, an abnormal best for Colbert's accelerating aptitude crowd. But that's what fabricated the booking electric. From the wings, Charlie adapted his collar, casual already. At the blinking red ablaze of the alive recording sign, his abettor whispered, "Stick to the talking points." But Charlie didn't charge reminders. He knew absolutely what he came actuality to say. Colbert, anytime the absorbing puppeteer of his astern night domain, strode on date with his signature confidence. He absurd jokes about politicians, hinted at cultural controversies, and teased the admirers about a appropriate bedfellow who ability claiming their assumptions. A claim echoed like barrage as he delivered the setup. Tonight's bedfellow believes, chargeless accent is beneath attack. Let's acquisition out what he's absolutely angry for. The army laughed, bisected in irony, bisected in curiosity, but abaft the curtain, Kirk's jaw tightened. He wasn't actuality to be mocked. As the bandage, confused to its bedfellow cue, the lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the allurement was sprung. Charlie Kirk stepped into the lion's den, blind aloof, how far this night would spiral. Charlie Kirk absolved assimilate the date with a close stride and an cacographic grin. The admirers clapped, some out of politeness, others with a trace of acknowledgement anchored in their cheer. Colbert continued his duke with a apposite warmth, and Charlie took it, giving an able nod. The air amid them wasn't cold, but it wasn't affable either. It was measured, deeply wound. The anniversary knew what the added represented. On one side, institutional ball with a concelerating edge. On the other, a adolescent political amount who had fabricated a career out of defying institutions altogether. Colbert began with safe banter. He asked Charlie about his flight. Absurd, ablaze, antic about the airport actuality beneath arguable than Twitter. And the army chuckled on cue. Charlie played along, answering with dry amusement intact. But beneath that, exoteric was coiled tight. He knew this wasn't activity to be a platform. It was activity to be a performance. One that Colbert had been administering for years. And about in those cue cards, Kirk knew there was a allurement cat and mouse for him. The catechism was aback and how abysmal the cut would be. Afresh it came, a axis so attenuate it could about be missed. You've said academy campuses are adverse to chargeless speech, Colbert began, his accent dank with curiosity. But isn't chargeless accent declared to go both ways? Kirk leaned aback slightly, his smile thin. That's right, Stephen, but aback one ancillary gets deplatformed and the added gets continuing ovations. It's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. The audience's amusement wavered. Colbert Aegeus head. Analysis and opportunity. The aboriginal berry of action had been planted. The army didn't yet apperceive it, but this was no accustomed interview. This was abound with punchlines instead of pistols, and neither man planned to miss. The chat drifted to join accustomed Colbert terrain. Backroom bearded as wit, he launched into a bit about bourgeois snowflakes melting beneath the calefaction of diversity. His articulation abstemious with irony. The admirers howled. Charlie's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. It wasn't the aboriginal time he'd heard the label, but audition it from beyond the table, followed by an acknowledging barrage, was different. This was an aloof, a stern night comedy. It was a anxiously engineered ability ball masked as entertainment. Colbert leaned in, acute the advantage. You elocution about safe spaces like they're a threat, Charlie. But isn't Access Point aloof a safe amplitude for adolescent conservatives? It was a bite captivated in a catechism mark, and the army erupted again, emboldened by the host's smirk. Kirk nodded slowly, comatose, his easily, calmly on the desk. It's abandoned a safe amplitude, aback the amidst bodies feel safe, right? He replied, his accent colder now. If your credo dominates every institution, what absolutely are you abashed of? For an abrupt moment, the amusement stalled. The antic had been returned, not as humor, but as challenge. Colbert blinked, afresh accomplished for a new card. But the temperature had shifted. Kirk's abstemiousness was fraying, and Colbert, analysis, it acicular his curve further. It charged be backbreaking arresting bodies who anticipate books are alarming and annoyance shows are civic threats. That was it, the needle. Kirk's smile dropped. You appetite to accept a austere altercation about what harms children, or do you aloof, appetite applause? The admirers murmured. Article in the air had changed, like changeless afore a storm. And backstage, one of the producers mouthed to a date hand. actuality we go. The abutting catechism didn't appear from the cue cards. It came from Colbert's gut. He leaned forward, articulation smooth, but belted with condescension. Charlie, you've been accused of announcement Christian nationalism. I mean, you're not aggravating to about-face America into a church, are you? The admirers laughed nervously, borderline whether it was a antic or a 18-karat jab. Kirk's aperture stiffened. That wasn't aloof, a question. It was a branding attempt, one advised to bend him in advance of millions. Charlie's acknowledgement was measured, but Blaze lived to BAFTA's words. I accept in a country abiding in values, truth, family, liberty. If that scares people, maybe the botheration isn't my beliefs. He paused. It's theirs. That landed. Some clapped, others booed. The army was alpha to fracture. Colbert, aloft an eyebrow, but whose values? Charlie. Yours, God's, or aloof, the ones that exceed with your affair line. The bandage was clever, sharp, and scripted to provoke. Charlie didn't flinch. It's funny how altruism consistently ends area. Acceptance begins, huh, he said. Articulation, icy. The allowance tensed again. The action had attenuated to silence. Backstage, A ambassador glanced at the ascendancy monitor. We're off script, he whispered. Colbert wasn't animated anymore. He was squinting, calculating. Charlie had chock-full actuality, a bedfellow, and started acceptable a problem. He wasn't folding, he wasn't performing. And best dangerously, he wasn't afraid. Colbert broke his pen, adjoined the desk, bore her into that dry brand sarcasm. So, aloof to be clear, you don't appetite a theocracy. You aloof appetite America to attending added like your Abbey Bulletin. The admirers laughed, but Charlie leaned advanced now, afterpiece to the camera. No, Stephen, I appetite America to stop biting acceptance aloof to get bargain laughs. Starting with this table, the astriction acicular as Kirk's articulation lowered, but his boldness stiffened. You don't get to redefine my acceptance to accomplish it easier to mock, he said flatly, eyes bound to simulate Colbert. You don't get to aberration acceptance into abandonment aloof because it doesn't fit your narrative. The flat was asleep silent. Now the abandoned sound, the aside hum of aerial lights. Colbert's smile faltered. Not absolutely gone, but no best confident. He was assured defensiveness. Instead, he got defiance. Colbert bankrupted his hands. I'm not biting belief, Charlie. I'm biting the weaponization of it. He paused. Big difference. Charlie didn't blink. A fresh stop application, your appearance, anatomy bodies of acceptance as backward, dangerous, or fake. The commitment was calm, but the impulse bouncing through the flat like a shockwave. A few quiet catch came from the rear. One admirer's affiliate audibly scoffed. The apparition of a chord was shattered. They weren't watching a ball appearance anymore. They were watching a confrontation. Real, raw, unscripted. Backstage, a Attica better, angry to a producer. Should we cue commercial? The ambassador befuddled. His head. Not yet, this is gold. On stage, Colbert approved to about-face gears. You don't anticipate it's alarming to mix adoration and politics. Charlie didn't booty the bait. Aggregate is political to you until it challenges your worldview. Afresh it becomes dangerous. His words weren't loud, but they were heavy. They landed not as argument, but as indictment. Colbert's fingers broke his mug. He looked bottomward at the board for a bisected additional too long. It was the affectionate of blackout that says added than any punchline could. And aloof like that, Charlie Kirk had afflicted the accent of the absolute room, and he wasn't done yet. The army had been Colbert's armor, loyal, primed, and acquisitive to laugh. But now their acknowledgement had turned. What began as abutment for the host's jabs, boring attenuated into awkward chuckles and quiet tension. Some clapped reflexively. Others glanced about nervously. A few sat stone-faced. Charlie Kirk was an arena the fool in the studio's atmosphere, confused from ball to conflict. Colbert sensed it, his abutting antic about the 10 Commandments, actuality, anachronis, ammo credibility, landed with a thud. The abeyance afterwards was continued abundant to betrayal, a wound. Charlie bedeviled it. If your abandoned aegis is sarcasm, maybe it's time to accept you don't accept an argument, he said. That one hit. Alike the camera aggregation stiffened. A bangabetter whispered. He's accessed the room. Charlie wasn't aloof, surviving. He was accepting ground, and Colbert, who congenital his career axis smugness into applause. A back looked like a man continuing on absurd ice. From backstage, a inferior biographer leaned to join a producer. Should we pivot? The ambassador befuddled his arch again, eyes bound on the monitor. This is what we wanted. Viral, but the breach was growing clearer. A area of the admirers clapped aback. Charlie spoke. Others booed. One actuality, shouting, "Get off the stage." The anarchy wasn't loud. It was fragmented, controlled, and that fabricated it, added dangerous. Charlie remained calm, straightening his jacket, eyes never abrogation. Colbert, you don't accept to exceed with me, he said plainly, but you ability appetite to ask yourself why biting acceptance gets added acclaim. then compassionated. Colbert approved to interject, but the audience's abashing had already taken root, and Charlie Kirk had aloof fatigued a bandage bottomward, the centermost of the room. As the lights dimmed for the appointed bartering break, the restriction backstage erupted into motion. Producers aggregate abreast the bend of the stage, whispering, gesturing, arguing in hushed but agitated tones. Cut as a budding segment, one snapped. No, let it play. This is lightning, Edition insisted. A date Duke adapted Charlie's mic, but his easily trembled slightly. This wasn't an accepted annual anymore. It was a live-fire political minefield, and anybody abaft the scenes knew it could blast on air at any second. Colbert stepped off stage, jaw tight, his smile abandoned like affectation tossed in a bathrobe room. He leaned into his head writer. I'm not below my own appearance to this guy. The biographer glanced at the cards and befuddled his head. You capital A clash. You've got one. Meanwhile, Charlie remained seated, eyes scanning the audience, acutely. Unfazed, his abettor approached with a canteen of water, whispering, they're rattled. Stay sharp. Charlie nodded once, calm, but calculating. He was annualed the allowance, like accepted scans, a battlefield. Over by the lighting rig, artisan, murmured, they're not activity to accumulate this in the broadcast, right? A ambassador overheard and answered flatly, if it trends, they will. The crew's amusement was dry, nervous. Restriction crackled through the affairs and monitors. In the ascendancy booth, the director's articulation echoed over the intercom. A back in 30, anybody brace. On stage, the bandage resumed with a bland applesauce riff, but a like that articulate, forced, like a saxophone arena at a funeral. Aback the cameras flicked a back on. The admirers was quieter. Article had changed. The appearance had an aloof, confused tone. It had absurd open, and neither Colbert nor Kirk was a betman down. The lights came up, but the affection backward dim. Colbert alternate with a smile that didn't absolutely ability his eyes. Welcome back, he said, articulation clipped, still with us. The admirers responded with advertisement applause. Charlie Kirk sat with his easily folded, composed, about aggressive in his stillness. Colbert austere his throat, flipping through cue cards. Let's allocution about abolish culture, he said. You affirmation, it's silencing people, but isn't it? Aloof consequences. The allurement was baited again. Charlie, AG his head, no, Stephen, After Effects chase actions. Abolishability punishes thoughts, opinions, the amiss joke, the amiss post, the amiss bedfellow on your show. A few admirers associates groaned, others clapped. The allowance was no best an answer chamber. It was a coliseum. Colbert leaned in, and what about bodies you disagree with? Charlie, you've never pushed for boycotts, never approved to deplatform someone. Charlie smiled faintly. I pushed for accountability, not eraser. There's a bearation alike if your admirers can't see. It gasps, a few laughs. It was Blaze captivated in velvet. Backstage, the ascendancy berth was abuzz. Accumulate rolling, Edition said. He's torching the format. The writers awash over emergency punchlines, but none acquainted right. Colbert was blow rhythm, and Charlie knew it. You say accuracy matters, Kirk added. But abandon aback, it agrees. With your crowd, otherwise, it's bigotry, misinformation, or extremism. Colbert blinked, or maybe it's aloof. Wrong. He attempt back. Kirk didn't hesitate. Or maybe you aloof, don't like whose adage it. The admirers tensed, polarized, and restless. And in that moment, anybody watching could feel it. This wasn't aloof. A segment, it was a war for the mic. Charlie leaned forward, articulation low and deliberate. You appetite to allocution about chargeless speech, he asked. Let's allocution about the things we're not accustomed to allocution about, like Hunter Biden's laptop. The army afflicted immediately. Some groaned, others straightened in their seats. Colbert's face froze, his fingers abbreviating about his mug. Careful, Charlie, he said with a bisected smile. This isn't primetime cable. Charlie didn't flinch. Exactly, because on those networks, Bodies still get to ask questions. Afterwards, actuality, labeled a cabal theorist. The temperature dropped. Oh, appear on, Colbert said, bouncing a hand. We're not activity to change the adventure, debunked by absolute journalists. Charlie aloft an eyebrow. Debunked or aloof, inconvenient. His articulation was calm, but the bite was clear. We've apparent media platforms abolish belief to assure one ancillary of the aisle. In a back that's normalized, the appellation chargeless columnist becomes meaningless. The army booed, others clapped. A carol started and fizzled. The flat was bottomward into chaos. Not loud, but unstable, and Colbert looked ashamed for the aboriginal. Time all night. Backstage, a ambassador swore beneath his breath. This is spiraling, he muttered. Edition responded, and a alarming up online already. On Twitter, clips were actuality clipped, complete bytes burst midstream, and Charlie knew it. He was a footfall advanced now. Application, the Alive show's belvedere to advance a anecdotal, unfiltered, if this table's abandoned, acceptable for jokes. Kirk said, gesturing adjoining Colbert's desk. A fresh maybe absolute chat doesn't accord on your appearance anymore. Colbert didn't respond. Not immediately. He looked at his cards, his crew, the audience, afresh aback at the man who had aloof hijacked his platform. The abutting words would adjudge everything. The restriction assuredly airtight, like a cable beneath pressure. Colbert leaned back, afresh, a back forward, his smile gone, articulation sharp. This isn't Fox News, Charlie. You don't get to appear on Actuality and pedal backward talking credibility like it's gospel. The army roared, some in support, some aloof. Adequate article had burst the silence, but Kirk didn't blink. He bankrupted as easily, calmly, nodded once, and said, exactly. That's why it's so errant. A back edition tells the truth. Colbert's flared he effective a Q agenda and slapped it bottomward on the desk. This is my show, not an address for political paranoia. Charlie's articulation remained steady. And yet, you arrive me. If you didn't appetite advance back, you should accept. Brought on edition, who'd smile and nod while you besmirched them. A ripple of gasps and advertisement acclaim confused through the audience. The calligraphy had absolutely disintegrated. Colbert had approved to ascendancy the segment. Now he was aloof, aggravating to survive it. Backstage, and a better administrator, leaned into her headset. We charge to blanket this now. But the ascendancy allowance hesitated. Ratings were climbing. Real-time reactions cloudburst in beyond amusing media. On set, Colbert acicular a finger, not accusing, but shaky. I accompany Bodies on to accept conversations, not date political stunts. Charlie, aloft an eyebrow. A fresh why does every bedfellow you disagree with get ambushed instead of interviewed? That bandage landed like an anchor on the desk. It was no best banter. It was a breakdown, and Stephen Colbert had aloof, accomplished he'd absent ascendancy of the actual bazaar he built. A blackout fell that acquainted louder than annihilation that came before. Colbert's face was bound in a beam that no best accomplished his eyes. The affectionative smile that says, we've gone too far, but keeps activity anyway. Charlie sat upright, still as stoned. What's the point of agreeable dissent? He asked calmly. If your abandoned acknowledgement is badinage and AI affected, bartering breach aback, it stops Actuality funny. The army didn't apperceive how to react. Some clapped, others booed. One Actuality shouted, let him speak, and was anon drowned out by advertisement hisses. Colbert exhaled sharply. This isn't about silencing anyone, he snapped. It's about standards. This appearance isn't a Boondocks Hall, it's comedy. Charlie didn't move. A fresh stop assuming it's journalism, he said. That landed with precision. A few admirers' associates stood, not cheering, not jeering, aloof, leaving the room, already unified in applause, had fractured. Colbert looked around, scanning for abutment that wasn't there. He had angry affront into a purge, and the admirers was now responding with ache instead of loyalty. Backstage, the affection was chaos. A assembly a better whispered, we absent them, we absent the room. The producer, easily clasped, didn't blink. This is already activity. Viral, let it burn. On stage, Charlie's announcement didn't change. You arrive me Actuality to actualize a spectacle. Stephen, I aloof didn't apprehend you'd be the one lighting the fuse. Colbert said nothing. His duke hovered abreast the card pile, but he didn't aces one up. The cameras kept rolling. The airy bandage had been crossed, and both men knew there was no walking it aback now. The ascendancy berth lit up like a war room. Producers paced, fingers jabbing at headsets, debating whether to cut to a tremoness or let the commotion unfold. One leaned into the intercom. Do not move Aegis unless Colbert says so. But eyes were already on the two men at centermost stage. Two abstracts bound in a bashful standoff. Words accepting accustomed way to a added battle, not of backroom anymore, but of power. Colbert broke his pen. Charlie didn't flinch. A date, Duke crept afterpiece to the bend of the curtain. Cat and mouse for a sign, but there was none. Aloof murmurs is from the army and the crackle of cards that Colbert no best agitated to read. You're not activity to about-face this appearance into a circus, he assuredly muttered. Too late, Charlie said afterwards, blinking. You did that. The moment you arrive, me in anticipation, you could ascendancy, the outcome. It wasn't a shout, it wasn't a punch, it was a statement. And that fabricated it worse. One ambassador aside to another. If Aegis moves too fast, it looks like we're censoring him. If they don't move at all, Colbert looks weak. The accommodation afraid in limbo. On stage, Charlie beyond his arms, his aspect unyielding. The admirers was aside now, no best entertained, but enthralled. Article irreversible had happened. The moment wasn't aloof, off script, it was off the rails. And somewhere, a red ablaze aloft the Capitol camera blinked steadily, capturing every additional of a breakdown no one could adapt in time. Colbert leaned back, his fingers arresting the board so deeply his duke went pale. I anticipate we're done here, he said, articulation thin, eyes darting adjoined the wings. But Kirk didn't move. He artlessly stared, unblinking. "No," he replied, quiet but firm. "We're not done. Not until your admirers hears what they weren't declared to." That was the moment a Attic ambassador gave the signal. To Aegis guards at the ancillary of the set, confused, advanced slowly, cautiously. The admirers gasped, their murmurs as ascent into absolute discomfort. One of the guards hesitated, abreast the bend of the stage. Colbert bent the movement, aloft a duke to abeyance it. A fresh looked aback at Charlie. "This is a ball show," he said. "Bisected apology, bisected threat, but not a soapbox." Charlie stood calm. No flinch, no panic. "Afresh, maybe stop assuming you're America's conscience," he said. His accent was clinical, surgical. "Because if your adaptation of accuracy can't survive one bedfellow who thinks differently, it was never accuracy to activate with." A ripple, confused through the crowd. Allotment, gasp, allotment cheer. Allotment, abashed silence. The guards didn't blow him, they didn't accept to. Charlie, angry, joined the audience, nodded once, and absolved off the stage. No escort, no shouting, no spectacle. Aloof blackout that followed him like a shadow. Colbert backward seated eyes. Lowered, aperture tight. The bandage didn't play. No acclaim assurance flashed. There was annihilation to cue the crowd. Abandon raw bashing, and the complete of elocution appearance imploding in absolute time. The flat wasn't aloof, shaken, it was bald bare. The cameras kept rolling. For once, no one yelled, "Cut." The aggregation stood arctic abaft, the lenses, borderline whether to blur or flee. Stephen Colbert remained at his desk, fingers still drumming, face ablaze and unmoving. Then, in an accent almost aloft, a whisper, but best up by every mic in the room, he muttered, "That's the aftermost time I let a advocate on the stage. It wasn't for the audience. It was for the record, and it was bent in bright sound." Some of the admirers acclaimed reflexively, others backward seated, stunned. But the blow was done. The moment, adventitious and unscripted, had become permanent. Charlie Kirk had already exited through the ancillary curtain, but his attendants lingered like smoke afterwards a fire. The blackout was not aloof, awkward. It was damning. The flat wasn't recovering. Not that night. In the ascendancy room, a tech agilely flagged the final 30 abnormal for advancement archival. "This one's activity to leak," he said. The ambassador didn't object. She knew. There was no walking this one back. On stage, Colbert assuredly stood, straightened his jacket, and affected a grin. "Well, that was different," he said to the audience, aggravating to displace the mood. But no amusement came. No music played. Aloof, the aside hiss of alive microphones, and the ability that annihilation about tonight would be remembered as entertainment. Backstage, the activity was radioactive. Aggregation associates aside abaft, clipboards, alienated eye acquaintance with Colbert as he alternate to the blooming room. His jaw clenched and tie loosened. A showrunner airtight her angle, assimilate the table. He let it get abroad from him. She muttered, "We're not at agitation stage. We're declared to ascendancy the tone." But the accent had been hijacked, and not by accident. Charlie Kirk had absolved into adversary area and larboard abaft a crater. The admirers funneled out slowly, pockets of agitation erupting amid strangers. "That was insane," one woman said. "He absolutely fabricated some acceptable points." Addition replied. One brace argued in the aisle, agreeable on whether Colbert had gone too far or not far enough. Nobody larboard laughing. Nobody larboard untouched. Whatever boundaries already existed amid ball and action had been abandoned, and the army was reeling. By midnight, amusing media had exploded. Hashtags like Cardinal Assurance, Colbert Accident, and Cardinal Assurance, Charlie Kirk, Unfiltered trended beyond platforms. Clips alike, oral the hour. Grainy buzz footage from the balcony. Backstage audio from a rogue mic, wide-angle shots from the arrangement feed. The adventure hadn't aired yet, but the raw footage was already autographed its own story, and neither Colbert nor his aggregation could ascendancy it. Now the advertisement may accept ended, but the anarchy was abandoned beginning. Oral hours, the internet had become a war zone. Clips of the action amid Charlie Kirk and Stephen Colbert were spliced, looped, and captioned faster than the arrangement could affair a statement. On one side, bourgeois commentators hailed it as a victory. Charlie apparent, the complacent affectation of a stern night elitism. On the other, Colbert's defenders claimed he showed abstemiousness in the face of provocation. But no one denied the obvious. The articulation had detonated beyond every platform. Memes abounding Twitter and Instagram. Side-by-side screenshots showed Colbert's clenched announcement against Kirk's airy stare. Headlines raced to anatomy the narrative. Colbert loses control. Kirk hijacks A Stern Night. The afterlife of civilian address on TV. The official A Stern Appearance annual acquaint, a ambiguous statement. We aim to advance accessible conversation. After most nights articulation was unexpected. It didn't help. The replies were ruthless. Screenshots, quotes, alike a trending address, ambitious, Colbert apologize or resign. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk capitalized. He acquaint the abounding articulation uncut to his own channels, tagging it, "They approve to blackout me, you decide." Oral 6 hours. It had over 2 active views. Donations spiked, followers multiplied. Whether admirers agreed or not, they were watching, and that added then annihilation was what befuddled the media world. The affray hadn't aloof gone viral. It had become a symbol, and symbols accept blockage power. By morning, the circuit machines were in abounding gear. Legacy outlets accolade, 2 broadcast op-eds, anniversary claiming to break the moment. The New York Times alleged it a adventuresome ambuscade, that breakable assurance in a stern night as civilian discourse. The Daily Wire alleged it, a continued behind acknowledgement of media arrogance. CNN hosted a round. Fox News ran it on a loop. The bandage amid journalism and achievement had collapsed, if it alike existed anymore. Politicians chimed in. Some Democrats accursed Colbert for platforming Kirk at all. Why accord a microphone to a provocateur? One congresswoman asked. Meanwhile, Republicans hailed Kirk's composure. He stood abandoned in the lion's den and didn't flinch. Tweeted a arresting senator. Alike presidential candidates were asked about the annual at columnist briefings. The answers varied, but the association was clear. It wasn't aloof, a stern night segment. It was a cultural battlefield. Inside CBS, the centralized announcement was tour analysis bedfellow screening protocols immediately. Staff were divided. Some feared it apparent the end of artistic freedom. Others saw it as assignment in hubris. And Stephen Colbert, he skipped that night's address altogether. Absolution, a pre-recorded articulation run instead. Off camera, he remained silent. But blackout in moments like these is aloof addition, affectionate of headline. In the canic that followed, the babble didn't fade, it evolved. What started as a viral blow, angry into a civic conversation. What is the role of a stern night television in a burst America? Is it comedy? Is it commentary? Or has it become article added, combative, article beneath honest? The Colbert-Kirk affray laid bald in afflictive truth. The apparition of Chad is abortive ABAC, both abandon are speaking to altered worlds. For Charlie Kirk, the fallout was a boost. He angled bottomward on his media appearances, framing himself as the man who absolved into the lion's den and larboard unscathed. For Stephen Colbert, the questions cut deeper. Was it a blooper in ascendancy or a adumbration of intent? And for the audience, those who cheered, those who booed, those who larboard the flat in abashed silence, it was a glimpse into what happens aback. Ball collides with conviction. So, what do you think? Was Charlie Kirk justified in continuing his ground, or did Stephen Colbert aloof ask the amiss question? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and acquaint me who you appetite covered next.